Welcome back, everybody. CT here, back with my 2014 SEC football preview, and today we're talking about the Georgia Bulldogs. Mark Richt back for his 14th year at Georgia. At this point, you got to imagine that Mark Richt's going to just go ahead and retire there. He's had a lot of success. He's been on the hot seat quite a few times, but every single year that he's been on the hot seat, he always found a way to save his job towards the end of the year, and Georgia usually plays their best ball towards the end of the year. And quick recap of the 2013 season: Georgia finished 8-5 overall and 5-3 in the SEC. Was absolutely decimated by injuries. Maybe them and Florida, it's close. Which team was hurt by injuries worse in 2013? But they were both absolutely destroyed by injuries. Just basically every single weapon on offense. And then towards the end of the year in the Kentucky game, Aaron Murray goes down, the torn ACL. Just a horrible thing to see for a senior like Aaron Murray with the just hell of a career he had at Georgia. That was really tough to see. And they finished the season, and Hudson Mason finished the season off, and with a win against Georgia Tech, against their in-state rivals, and with a loss in the Gator Bowl to Nebraska, and in a game that he did not play well. Georgia did not play well at all. Uh, it was just a weird game, and if Aaron Murray played in that game, I think Georgia wins that game very easily. But they lost, but that's all right. Hudson Mason gets some experience that I think it was a blessing in disguise for that reason. I think I would rather have Hudson Mason start two games to end 2013 than Aaron Murray finish those two games and win against Georgia Tech and in the bowl game against Nebraska. For what reason really? It's good for Hudson Mason to go ahead and get some experience like he did. And Georgia's returning 5 starters on offense and 10 on defense. And I don't see how they are only returning 5 starters on offense. I know there are a couple offensive linemen they're not getting back, but it seems like they're getting everyone back. I don't see how they're only returning 5 starters, but I guess that's what it said, so I guess that's true. And 10 on defense, which is good. They were a young defense last year. They gave up a lot of yards in a lot of games, but Georgia's defense should be quite a bit better, I think, towards the end of the season in 2014. Key losses to this team: Aaron Murray, and this is as big of a loss as any player in the country. Aaron Murray just did everything for Georgia over the past several years. I mean, one of the greatest Georgia players of all time. You can make an argument that he's the greatest Georgia quarterback ever. I mean, did so many great things. He never really got what he wanted. Came up, I think, it was a couple of yards short in that SEC championship game in 2012 against Alabama. But man, he was that close to winning the SEC championship. And then I would have to imagine that they pretty much would have done the same thing to Notre Dame that Alabama did in 2012. So that close to probably winning a national championship. Pretty good. Uh, Hudson Mason is replacing him. I've already talked about that a little bit. Uh, that's I'm not exactly sure what that's going to be like. I think he'll be all right, but I think it may take him a few games to get settled in. He has loads of weapons, so that is definitely a good thing in his favor. He it's just uncertainty. You just don't know how good he's going to be for sure. He looked pretty good against Georgia Tech. Did not look that great against Nebraska in the bowl game, but his receivers weren't helping him either. If I recall correctly, receivers were dropping balls in crucial parts of that game against Nebraska. There was Arthur Lynch at tight end, who was a pretty big security blanket for Aaron Murray at times. They do have Bennett though, so that shouldn't hurt them too bad. Lose a couple offensive linemen, but I think their offensive line will still be pretty strong. Uh, Key returners, Todd Gurley and Keith Marshall. Got to be the best backfield in the country, doesn't it? Todd Gurley got to be the best running back in the country. I mean, just a really big, powerful, fast back. I mean, I know running backs don't get taken that highly in the NFL draft anymore, but man, someone's got to take a chance on Todd Gurley in the first round. I mean, it's just crazy not to. I mean, the guy is just a beast when he's healthy. I don't think he was 100% towards the end of last year. From what I saw, he just didn't really seem to be moving that quickly in and out of his cuts, and I don't. He seemed a little banged up, and the whole Georgia team was. So I mean, I don't know how much you can take into 2013 was just basically a throwaway year for Georgia as far as I'm concerned. And Keith Marshall, I think having him will help Todd Gurley a lot. Help Todd Gurley out a lot because it just takes a lot of pressure off him, and it helps Hudson Mason out a lot. When you have those two backs, man, it just allows the other back to be so fresh when he comes in, and it's going to be a vicious running game for Georgia this year. Chris Conley back at wide receiver, I think he's their best receiver. Probably will be the number one target for Hudson Mason. Uh, I thought it was interesting. I watched SEC Media Day, and this guy is actually like making movies and stuff. So I thought that was pretty interesting. He seemed like a really cool, intelligent guy. Really like Chris Conley. Uh, they returned Damian Swan and Josh Harvey-Clemons in the defensive backfield. Two guys who they had solid year last year. I think they're the two best defensive backs. They lose Matthews, who is transferring to Auburn. I don't think he's going to play this year. I think he has to sit out a year. But I look for Damian Swan more specifically than rather than Josh Harvey-Clemons to have a really good year and probably develop to be a NFL prospect. You know, to get taken in the first 3 or 4 rounds. And Josh Harvey-Clemons is going to be good as well. Let's go ahead and get to their 2014 schedule. Where's my phone at? Hold on a second. All right. Quit texting me. All right. They opened the season against Clemson. This time at Georgia. Georgia better win this game. There's no excuse whatsoever for Georgia to lose this game. And Georgia has really disappointed me as an SEC fan the past 5 or 6 years or so. They've not been very good out of conference in any type of big game. They've lost. Seems like they win about half their bowl games. They never really play well in their openers against out of conference teams. I know they lost to Clemson last year. They lost to Boise State a couple years ago. In the Georgia Dome. How do you lose to Boise State in the Georgia Dome when you're Georgia? Georgia has been really disappointing out of conference. They just have. I'm sorry. But I think they get the job done this time. At home, in a revenge game. No Taj Boyd, no Sammy Watkins for Clemson. No reason to lose this game. Then they have a bye, which is not a very good thing because you never want to have a bye that early. I know you get 2 byes in college, but you could have used it a few weeks down the road rather than now. So, but nonetheless, take your bye, go into South Carolina, and that's where the East is going to be won. I think it'll be a difficult game. South Carolina's going to be a very good team this year, and if you see my South Carolina preview, I picked South Carolina there, so I obviously got to pick them here. But that'll be a very good game, and that game's probably a toss-up. It really depends on Hudson Mason. Everything in this entire season is going to depend on Hudson Mason for me. He's loaded with weapons. He should be, if he's just decent, then I think Georgia has a chance to win the East. Um, then they play against Troy, which is a win, obviously. And then they play against Tennessee. Tennessee is a couple years away, I think, so that'll be another win. Then they play Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt lost James Franklin and Jordan Matthews, and they're not the same team. Should be another win. And yeah, that's a revenge game too, by the way, because Vanderbilt beat Georgia last year when Georgia was decimated with injuries. But yeah, no excuse for Georgia not to win there. Then they go to Missouri. No excuse to lose that game. Missouri's lost everyone basically. Dorial Green Beckham, Henry Josie, that other was it Damian Washington, their other wide receiver. Matty Mock's an upgrade over James Franklin, I think, but no excuse for Georgia not to win that game. But it is kind of a sneaky game. We don't really know exactly how good Missouri is because we're not sure about their depth. Uh, but they really haven't recruited that well over the past couple of years. So I like Georgia to win that one. Uh, and that's another revenge game because Missouri came into Georgia and beat them last year. Of course, Georgia was absolutely that was Georgia's lowest point as far as injuries go. That was when they were the most banged up, I think. I don't think Gurley even played in that game. And man, that was bad. What bad luck Georgia had last year, considering all the injuries and the Hail Mary and the Auburn game. Just really tough breaks for Georgia. It was a tough year if you're a Bulldog fan, I'd have to imagine. Then they go to Arkansas. They draw Arkansas out of the West as their rotating team. Very good draw. And as I've stated in previous previews, that is huge. What teams you draw out of the opposing division in the SEC, huge. You want Arkansas as the best team you could draw out of the West. No question about it. Easy win for Georgia. Then they go to bye. Perfect time for a bye week this time. Right before you play Florida and Jacksonville. And I like Georgia in this game against Florida. A lot of people think Florida's going to be really good this year. I think they're going to be better. But I like Georgia's weapons to be able to put some points up against what I think is going to be a good Florida defense. But yeah, I definitely like Georgia in that game. And I think Georgia's defense will be better at this point in the year. I think it's when you'll start seeing them come on. Uh, then they go to Kentucky. Kentucky is recruited well, but not they're not you're not going to see vastly improvements from them yet. Although Kentucky does seem to play Georgia tough uh, every 2 or 3 years, so uh, but you still got to take Georgia, no question about it. And then you got Auburn at home, and man, this is a huge revenge game for Georgia, as we all know what happened last year. The 70 something odd yard touchdown pass from Nick Marshall, Ricardo Lewis, Nick Marshall, the former Georgia uh, defensive back who got kicked off the team and went to Auburn. So Nick Marshall returns home to Georgia to take on the Bulldogs. This is a really interesting game. I like Auburn in this game though because I just think their offense has just got so much firepower. It's going to be even that much better than it was last year, which is very scary thought. They got to be the best offense in the country. I don't see any way that they're not. If you watch their spring game, they did not really run the ball at all. They just threw the ball all over the yard. Sammy Coates has really turned into a first round draft pick caliber receiver, and they got the number one JUCO player in the country, that Duke Williams, that receiver. They're going to be difficult to beat, and they got a good defensive line that can stop the run against Georgia. But they'll put up some points against Auburn. It'll be a really close game, but I like Auburn there. Then they got Charleston Southern, which is an easy win, and then Georgia Tech comes to Athens in that rivalry game. And when's the last time Georgia Tech beat Georgia? If you know, put it in the comments below because I'm curious about that. I think it's been a while, and it ain't gonna end this year either. If it didn't end last year when Aaron Murray was out with all the injuries Georgia had at Georgia Tech, then it's not going to end for a while. Definitely like Georgia. All right, let's add up their wins here. I think I got them losing 2 games. Was it one? Yep, they lost to South Carolina, and I had them lose to Auburn. 10-2, which may or may not get you into the SEC championship game. You never know. Probably not, because I don't think South Carolina. If you lose to South Carolina, I don't see them losing more than 2 games. Uh, of course, if you lose to Auburn as well, you'll have 2 losses, and South Carolina will have the head-to-head over you. It'll be interesting though. It's basically a toss-up, I think, between South Carolina and Georgia. I lean towards South Carolina because that game's at South Carolina, and they have a returning quarterback in Dylan Thompson. So that's where, not really a returning quarterback, but he's started several games over the past few years. So if you're replacing your starting quarterback, uh, the situation South Carolina's in is a very favorable one. And you have a guy who has started several games over the past couple of years, and he's a fifth-year senior. So, uh, so they'll probably win their bowl game, maybe. They lost it last year. Maybe, hopefully, they'll win it this year. And, they could sneak into BCS, could possibly sneak into the last 4 teams. You never know how that's going to shape out. A two-loss SEC team probably won't get in. For if they only have 1 loss though, they could not get an SEC championship and still get in to those 4 teams. So nonetheless, 10 or 11 wins, very good year for Georgia. Uh, I think that about does it for the Dogs. If you're a Georgia fan, I wish you all luck, and I thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.